So our teaching point, what we want to make sure we're paying attention to as we read. So we're going to be paying attention to character traits, relationships, and the point of view of the narrator. We're also going to be looking for some possible themes, and then definitely any changes to the story elements. So over here, you're going to see kind of our lens, what we're going to be looking for as we read. All right, let's get started. All right, chapter 2. The Cala Vista Motel sat on the corner of Coast Boulevard and Meadow Lane. It was a small motel, the first of 3 motels in a row. The Topaz Inn and the Lagoon Motel were right next door and bigger, but I immediately decided I liked our little motel the best. With its creamy walls and red doors, it looked warm and inviting. I looked up at the sign and read the words, "Low rates, cable TV, Disneyland just 5 miles away." Excitedly, I asked my parents if that meant we could go visit and go on all the rides. "We probably could," my mom said. I smiled, savoring the moment. Our lives were about to change. We were going to become Disneyland-going people. As if things couldn't get any better, the Cala Vista had a pool. It was right out in front, and the water sparkled in the golden sun. I closed my eyes and pictured myself doing cannonballs in the water all summer long. This was going to be amazing. So, wow, this sounds like a really incredible opportunity. They're close to Disneyland. I wish I lived 5 miles from Disneyland. That's like from where we are at school to like Manhattan. That's so close. And also a pool. Just behind the pool was the front office. I'd asked my parents in the car whether I could help out at the front desk, and my dad had chuckled and said, "We'll see." Mr. Yao was waiting for us in the front office. He buzzed us in and lifted the divider so we could all get behind the front desk. The front desk was a long wooden desk that stretched almost the entire width of the room. Just behind the front office were the manager's quarters, where Mr. Yao led us next. There was a living room with a bed in it, and he pointed to the bed. "You guys sleep here," he said to my parents, "so you can hear the customers in the middle of the night." "Customers come in the middle of the night?" my dad asked. Mr. Yao nodded. "Of course, it's a motel." "But won't that wake them up?" I asked. Mr. Yao rolled his eyes. "That's the point," he said. Next, he led us over to the small bedroom just to the right of the living room and the kitchen. "The girl can sleep here," Mr. Yao said. For some reason, he still kept calling me the girl, even though I'd already told him my name several times. I put my stuff down in the small bedroom, then joined my parents and Mr. Yao in the front office. Mr. Yao was explaining the buzzer. "One wrong buzz and it's all over," he said. "See that glass?" He pointed to the thick glass enclosing the front office. "That's bulletproof glass. You see a bad guy come up? You don't need to worry. They can't hurt you. But if you press this buzzer..." He put his fingers on the buzzer just under the front desk, and a loud buzz roared. "That door right there gets unlocked," Mr. Yao said. "And then what?" I asked him. "Then he's inside," Mr. Yao said. I looked around to see if there were any other magical buttons or bulletproof glass inside the office. There weren't. I asked Mr. Yao how we could tell if someone was a bad guy. "Well, based on how they look, of course," he said. Which made me wonder, because it's not like bad people walked around with a sticker on their head saying, "I'm bad." "The bottom line is, don't let in any bad guys," Mr. Yao warned. His pupils expanded as he said the word bad. Well, Mr. Yao took my parents out back to show them the laundry room and cleaning supplies. I stayed in the front office. I climbed up on top of the front desk stool. Gently, I reached down and touched the buzzer with my finger. It was greasy, like it had been pressed hundreds of times. Slowly, I pressed on it and heard a zap. I pressed it again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Power coursed through my fingertips. I closed my eyes and pictured myself checking customers in. "Why, yes, Mrs. Connolly, I'd be glad to show you to your room. Right this way." I'd say, "Certainly I can help you with your luggage. It would be my pleasure." So deep was I in my fake customer relations that I almost didn't hear it when a real customer walked up and tapped on the front office glass. I looked up to see a thin African-American man, about 50 or so years old, smiling and waving at me. He motioned with his hands for me to buzz him in. "Oh, right," I said, then pressed on the buzzer. Buzz. He pushed open the door and walked in. "Just saw Mr. Yao on the lot. You must be the new managers," he said. He extended his hand across the front desk. "Name's Hank." I smiled, took his hand, and shook it. "I'm Mia. Nice to meet you." He tilted his head to one side. How old are you, Mia? I'm 10, I told him. Say, aren't you a little young to be running this place? He teased me. I laughed. I liked Hank immediately. I'm helping my parents, I told him. What about you? Do you live here? Sure do, he said, and he pointed to one of the rooms. That's me right there, number 12. Hank informed me that he wasn't a regular customer, the kind who just stays a day or two. He was a weekly. A weekly is someone who pays by the week. There were 5 of them at the Cala Vista. They were Mrs. Q, Mrs. T, Hank, Billy Bob, and Fred. You'll meet them, he said. They're all nice people. I smiled. Do you guys like living here? I asked. Oh, yeah, he said. Well, except for Mr. Yao. Everyone hates Mr. Yao. Really? I asked him. He seems all right. Well, intense, but all right. Hank snorted. Trust me, he's anything but all right. Before I could ask Hank what he meant by that, the back door creaked open and my parents and Mr. Yao came back in. When I turned around, Hank was gone. All right, chapter 2. So Mr. Yao kind of seems uninterested in Mia, and he keeps calling her the girl. We don't really see him being mean just yet, but I'm kind of curious as to like why he can't remember her name. We meet some characters here. We met Hank, and then they mention that there's some other weekly paying guests, Mrs. Q, Mrs. T, Billy Bob, and Fred. So we definitely want to make sure that we pay attention to that. Also, Hank says that Mr. Yao is hated by everyone. And it seems like Mia's really excited about the motel, and she likes playing with that button that unlocks the door and pretending to be working at the desk. So I'm kind of wondering why she is thinking about how you can tell if someone is bad just by looking at them. It's kind of interesting that she's pointing that out. I wonder if that's foreshadowing something that might happen later. All right, chapter 3. Sign here on the dotted line, Mr. Yao said to my parents, presenting them with an enormous employment contract 6 pages long. My parents beamed as they proudly signed their names. Mr. Yao took the signed employment contract and stuffed it into his bag. Thank you so much, Mr. Yao, for giving us this opportunity, my father said. You don't know how much it means to us. He got choked up as he said the words. We promise we'll take good care of your motel, my mom added. We won't let you down. Mr. Yao nodded and held up the manager's keys to the motel. As my parents reached for the keys, he held them just out of reach. Everything that happens in this motel is your responsibility. You understand? He asked. Something breaks, you have to pay for it. My parents nodded. Under no circumstances are you ever to leave the motel unattended. Ever. One of you must always stay behind. Again, my parents nodded eagerly, even though I was thinking, wait, what? I can't go out with both my parents at the same time? But what about Disneyland? But it was condition number 3 that really made my draw drop. Mr. Yao turned to me. You can't use the pool, kid, he said. Why not? I asked. If you use the pool, then all the customers will want to use the pool. So? So think of all the water and towels they'll be wasting, he said. It's not good for the environment. I frowned at him. Somehow I doubted this was about the environment. She understands. We won't use the pool. Will you, Mia? My mother shook her head at me. I glanced at my mom, at the desperation in her eyes. Okay, I said. Good, Mr. Yao grinned, satisfied, and he tossed my parents the keys. Yee. So already I kind of see like maybe where they're going with Mr. Yao. He has a lot of like conditions about them having this job. That night, the sweet smells of jasmine tea filled the front office. My parents only ever got the jasmine tea out for special occasions. We had packed a small tin of it before we left China, and every time something good happened, my mom would take out a few leaves and make some tea. I guess not a lot of good things had happened because there was still quite a lot left. But all that was about to change. Tonight, my parents poured generously from the tin. The calming aroma brought me back to my grandmother's house, of all of us crowded around the table. At these big family dinners at my cousin Shen and I would always giggle and interrupt each other as we talked. I felt an ache in my tummy, razor sharp at the thought of Shen. I still remember the day I left. I could see Shen's face pressed up against the glass by the security gate at the airport, blinking furiously, like he was trying hard not to cry. And I was too. On the plane ride over, they gave us little packets of butter for our bread. Butter was very expensive in China, so I asked for extras, and I put them in my pocket. I saved them for Chen for months in the fridge, until it was sank in finally that we weren't going back. so I ate them. My mother's voice jerked me back to reality. Hey, Mia, look here. Look at me, she said, smiling. Huh? I asked. I looked up to see my mother crouching in front of the front desk, holding her hands up like she was about to take a picture. It's this thing she does. My mom says it's important to take pictures of the nice moments in life, even if it's just in your head. As my mom pressed down on her pretend camera, my dad and I sat up straight and gave her our very best smiles. Eggplant, she said in Chinese. And I giggled, because even though that's what people in China said whenever someone took pictures, it was funny hearing it in America. As my parents unpacked, I slipped out the back to find Hank. I brought him a cup of jasmine tea. Now that we were making $150 a day, surely we could afford to buy some more. I had seen a Chinese supermarket on the way over here. Hank's room was in the back, besides the laundry room. There was a pot of cherry tomato plants in front of his room. And I knocked on the door. Hank answered on the first knock. His eyebrows shot up when he saw the tea. That for me, he explained. I smiled and handed it to him. It's from China, I told him. Get out of here. The guy next door opened his door to see what was going on. He was a white guy about the same age as Hank, and he wore a Hawaiian shirt, and he had a small tattoo of a sailboat on his arm. The smell of popcorn drifted from his room. Billy Bob, Hank said. Meet Mia. She's the new manager. And look, she brought me some tea from China. Good to meet you, Mia, so Billy Bob said, extending a hand. I shook it. Pleasure's all mine, I said. Billy Bob smiled. Say, you're a lot nicer than the old manager. The last manager treated us like second-class citizens, Hank added. Really? I asked. Hank nodded. Carefully, he lifted the cup to his lips and took a sip. Oh, this stuff is good. Hank turned to Billy Bob. You gotta try this. More doors opened, and soon all the weeklies were outside, talking and sipping the tea under the glowing crescent. Like Billy Bob, they were white too. Mrs. Q had long wavy hair that ran all the way down her back. Fred had a big belly that shook when he laughed, and Mrs. T had a glittery cat eye reading glasses, and she wore them on the tip of her nose. Hank was right. They were all very nice. The weeklies asked if I wanted to join them for a game of Monopoly, but it was getting late, and I needed my help. I needed to help my parents unpack. I bid them all good night, and I was about to go back to the manager's quarters when I suddenly remembered. Hey, Hank, what did you mean by what you said earlier about Mr. Yao, I asked. That he was anything but all right. Hank's jaw locked. You'll find out, kid, soon enough. The man has coal for a heart. All right, chapter 3. So, plot here. What does Hank... I wonder why Hank says that Mr. Yao has coal for a heart. I'm thinking about, like, what could have happened for him to feel that way. I also think it's kind of crazy that Mia can't use the pool. It doesn't seem like saving longer is a real reason behind that. And the fact that her parents always, at least one of them always has to stay there. I'm not sure if that seems like it's fair. Like, what if somebody is, like, sick and they have to go to the hospital? And the other thing I thought is that the weeklies seem really nice. They were kind of asking me to play Monopoly. All right, friends. Chapter 2 and 3 question. What are some possible themes you're already seeing evidence for in the story? Use 2 details from the text to support your response. All right, friends, it's that time. I know you're familiar with this tool, the theme tool. Are there some themes that you are already seeing evidence for from the text? Even though we're going to have to wait until we get further along in the story to really tell if this is a theme that is going to be a reality for this story, the entire story, we can already start to see the beginnings of a theme here. So I want you to use this tool to answer this question. Make sure you're using 2 details from the text to support your response.